October 4th, 2025. A date that has rewritten Russia's map of war. At 04:31 a.m., a Ukrainian strike hit deep inside what Moscow once called its untouchable north. The explosion that tore through Lake Onega more than 1,000 kilometers from the Ukrainian trenches destroyed the Grad, a Buyan-M class missile corvette armed with Kaliber cruise missiles capable of carrying nuclear warheads. The question that shocked the world was immediate: how did Ukraine reach so far into Russia's heartland, into waters thought protected by layers of air defense, geography, and myth? For years, Russia's inland lakes and canals were treated as sanctuaries, the final hiding places for nuclear-capable vessels of the Northern Fleet. But the Onega strike proved that the age of geographic safety is over. According to Reuters and Defense News, Western surveillance satellites recorded sudden signal interference and a heat plume consistent with an internal explosion, confirming the ship's total loss. Analysts from BBC Monitoring called it a decisive moment. Russia's northern security architecture has been breached, both physically and psychologically. The Grad, weighing roughly 800 tons, was sailing toward the Caspian Sea, using the interlinked canal system that allows Russia to shuttle warships between the Arctic and Baltic without entering NATO waters. In theory, this network built in Stalin's era was Moscow's hidden artery bypassing Western radar. In practice, the strike showed it could become a trap. The damage to the ship's power unit compartment caused a secondary detonation that lit up the misty lake, creating a shockwave strong enough to rattle nearby settlements. Witnesses in the Karelia Republic described a thunder that came from under the water. According to Al Jazeera's late-night coverage, the attack was not only symbolic, but surgical. It pierced Russia's most sensitive defensive layer, one that for centuries relied on strategic depth, the belief that vast distances would exhaust any invader before reaching the core. But in the drone age, range is measured in algorithms, not kilometers. Ukrainian Special Operations Forces, in coordination with long-range drone units, turned one of Russia's safest harbors into an inferno. Behind the immediate explosion lies a larger economic shock. Lake Onega forms part of a vital logistics artery that transports raw materials, timber ore, and fuel northward to Murmansk and St. Petersburg. Defense economists from DW estimate that even a temporary shutdown of the route could cost Russia up to $3 billion in delayed shipments and emergency rerouting. The blow resonates far beyond the lake's surface, shaking insurance markets that already price Russia's northern waterways as high-risk zones. As the flames subsided, Moscow's state media struggled to control the narrative. On Rossiya 24, anchors initially dismissed reports of a strike as engine failure. Yet satellite imagery published by BBC Verify hours later contradicted that version, showing the vessel listing and smoke drifting across the lake. The Kremlin's delayed acknowledgement only deepened suspicion among ordinary Russians, especially in St. Petersburg, just a few hundred kilometers away, that the war had reached their doorstep. Strategically, the strike forced the Kremlin into an unprecedented dilemma. Should it divert advanced S-400 batteries northward to shield its interior, or leave them on the southern front, where Ukrainian counteroffensives continue to pressure Russian lines? Either choice weakens the other. Defense news analysts describe this as a perfect strategic choke, one Ukraine achieved not through mass divisions, but through precision and audacity. The United States, under President Donald Trump, publicly praised the tactical ingenuity of Ukraine's remote operations, while stopping short of confirming any NATO surveillance support, though Western radar tracking clearly played a background role in monitoring the strike corridor. The deeper message is unmistakable: nowhere in Russia is safe anymore. Onega, once a quiet retreat for the northern elite, has become a symbol of vulnerability. If drones can navigate through forests and radar shadows to destroy a Kaliber-armed warship, what else lies within reach? Could the next target be a power plant, a refinery or a submarine base farther north. The silence that followed the explosion felt heavier than the blast itself. Russia's vaunted fortress had been breached from within. And as panic rippled from Karelia to the Kremlin, one chilling question emerged. If the heart of Russia's inland fleet can burn, what does that mean for the arteries that feed it? How could a single lake strike shake the confidence of an empire that spans 11 time zones? To understand the scale of this shock, one must follow the trail of water connecting Lake Onega to the White Sea and the Baltic. The White Sea-Baltic Canal, a 227-kilometer engineering marvel carved through northern Russia, was once a symbol of Soviet endurance and sacrifice. Today, it has become a symbol of strategic exposure. Could this 20th-century artery built with the labor of Gulag prisoners now be the weak point that unravels Russia's 21st-century war strategy? This canal system, stretching from the Arctic Ocean to St. Petersburg, serves a dual purpose, commercial and military. It carries timber, oil, and minerals outward, but it also moves deadly cargo inward, caliber-equipped ships, coastal defense corvettes, and even nuclear-powered submarines under 20 meters wide. According to a BBC News maritime analysis published on October 8, intelligence satellites detected at least 3 Russian naval vessels rerouted through this canal in September, likely seeking shelter from Ukrainian strikes on the Black Sea Fleet. The Kremlin tried to hide its weapons under a blanket of geography, the report noted, but geography no longer provides cover. For Russia's northern fleet, headquartered in Murmansk, the canal is not just infrastructure, it is survival. It allows vessels to bypass NATO-monitored choke points near Norway and the United Kingdom, preserving the illusion of operational freedom. Defense News describes it as a private ocean within Russian borders. Yet after the Lake Onega incident, this private ocean suddenly feels like an open wound. Ukraine's strike didn't merely damage one ship, it signaled that every lock dam and transfer station along the canal could be within reach of long-range drones or sabotage teams. Western military experts see a deeper consequence. A report from Al Jazeera's investigative desk highlighted how the canal's shutdown even temporarily threatens Russia's ability to rotate its naval assets between seas. In peacetime, this system moves about 12 million tons of cargo annually. If the canal is compromised, the Northern Fleet's mobility will be crippled, forcing Moscow to expose its ships to NATO surveillance routes in the North Atlantic. That's a nightmare scenario for the Russian General Staff, a retired U.S. naval officer told Reuters. It means losing the element of secrecy that Russia's deterrent posture depends on. Economically, the canal's disruption ripples far beyond the military sphere. St. Petersburg's Port Authority relies on it to funnel resources from northern regions. Murmansk depends on its barge traffic for industrial supplies. Analysts from DW Business estimate that every week of canal closure could erase up to $500 million in regional trade. Insurance premiums for northern shipping routes have already doubled since the Onega explosion, and Western financial data show a surge in Russian state spending on canal security. The once hidden artery of Russia's war machine has become a drain on its treasury. Politically, the blow cuts to President Putin's legacy. This canal, inaugurated under his watch for modernization in 2019, was hailed as proof that Russia's northern flank was untouchable. Now, as NYT defense analyst Mark Hertling observed, the very symbol of internal strength has turned into a corridor of vulnerability. Even under President Trump's White House, the U.S. Department of Defense quietly acknowledged in a statement that NATO reconnaissance flights were monitoring increased maritime instability near St. Petersburg's approaches. While Washington officially denies direct involvement, NATO's eyes are clearly focused on the northern waterways, studying how Ukraine's tactics can inform Western defense strategies. The loss of secrecy, the fear of infiltration, and the economic aftershocks together form a new kind of pressure, one that doesn't rely on tanks or missiles, but on uncertainty. Each lock of the White Sea-Baltic Canal has now become a potential target, and each barge captain a witness to history. Russia's once hidden heart is now beating in full view of its enemies. If a single strike could expose this entire network, what happens when the next wave hits the arteries feeding Murmansk or St. Petersburg? The answer lies not only in geography, but in doctrine, a doctrine now crumbling under its own myths. For over 2 centuries, Russia's greatest shield was not technology, but terrain. From Napoleon's frozen retreat to Hitler's doomed advance, distance itself was Russia's strongest ally. The doctrine of strategic depth, the belief that vast geography could absorb and exhaust any invasion, was more than military logic. It was national identity. But in 2025, that armor cracked under a single strike at Lake Onega. The question now haunting Russian generals: if distance no longer protects the motherland, what does? Modern warfare, as the Ukrainian strike proved, doesn't march. It flies, navigates by AI, and pierces through borders invisible to old maps. According to Reuters defense correspondent Matthew Bodner, the Onega attack was the moment when Russia's 19th century geography collided with 21st century precision. The result, a doctrinal collapse. Ukraine demonstrated that front lines no longer exist, only targets do. And this time, those targets lie deep inside Russia's own infrastructure. For Moscow's military planners, this shatters the illusion that the war can be contained to Donbass or Crimea. The hit on the Grad vessel turned the Kremlin's own myth into a liability. Strategic depth has morphed from armor into exposure, a vast space impossible to defend in the era of drones with 200-kilometer range and satellite-guided navigation. BBC Newsnight's October 6th segment highlighted this paradox, noting how the very geography that once saved Russia is now the battlefield Ukraine can exploit at will. This realization echoes across the Russian elite. In closed-door briefings, senior officers admit that Ukraine's drones, built at a fraction of the cost of a single Russian fighter jet, are achieving psychological dominance. A DW military analysis piece estimated that the cumulative economic loss from Ukraine's deep strikes on Russian territory has surpassed $12 billion since 2023, counting infrastructure repair, air defense redeployment, and trade disruptions. Every kilometer Russia must defend now costs millions, and each unmanned aircraft Kyiv sends costs just tens of thousands. This asymmetry is not accidental. It is strategic. Ukraine's intelligence chief Kiriilo Budanov has repeatedly emphasized mobility over mass as the cornerstone of Kyiv's 2025 campaign. Western analysts draw parallels to NATO's hybrid warfare doctrine: small, precise, adaptive. The Al Jazeera Defense Desk even quoted a retired NATO planner describing Ukraine's recent tactics as a live case study in how alliances might counter large authoritarian powers without boots on the ground. Whether coordinated or coincidental, Ukraine's actions serve as a practical demonstration for NATO's future war planning. Meanwhile, Russia's internal panic grows. Once the Kremlin boasted of impenetrable layered defenses, the S-400 systems in Kaliningrad, the radar domes of the Arctic, the electronic warfare shields of Murmansk. Now all those seem scattered, reactive, and blind to stealthy intrusions from within. The Grad's destruction exposed the limits of these defenses, forcing Russian command to reposition units across 11 time zones. This logistical chaos, as the New York Times observed, creates paralysis disguised as control. Commanders cannot predict where to reinforce next: Donetsk, Belgorod, or the Baltic waterways. Adding to the strategic crisis is a psychological one. The loss of distance security undermines Russia's national myth of endurance. Putin's regime, built on projecting strength and stability, now faces the one thing autocracies fear most: uncertainty. The propaganda narrative that war is far away, fought by others, has disintegrated. Drones over Moscow were the warning. Lake Onega is the reckoning. Even Donald Trump's administration, while publicly avoiding escalation, reportedly views this doctrinal collapse as a turning point. According to Defense News, NATO's Northern Command in Brussels held emergency briefings to model secondary effects of Ukraine's inland strikes, particularly on Russia's Arctic resource routes. The message: the balance of deterrence is shifting not with armies, but algorithms. The great irony is that Russia's biggest strength, its size, is now its greatest curse. Every dam, canal, rail line, and fuel depot must be guarded. And in guarding everything, Russia can protect nothing. So if strategic depth no longer shields the Kremlin, what will replace it? Can Moscow reinvent its defense doctrine before the next wave of Ukrainian strikes reshapes the northern warfront once again? The shockwaves from Lake Onega reached far beyond Karelia. They rippled straight into St. Petersburg, Vladimir Putin's hometown, and the beating heart of Russia's ruling elite. For years, this city, nestled among imperial architecture and quiet canals, had lived as if the war were a television broadcast happening elsewhere. But after the Grad's destruction, a new reality settled in. The war had arrived at their summer dachas. And the fear spreading through Russia's second capital was not just military, it was psychological, economic, and political. St. Petersburg is trembling, one Western diplomat told The Guardian on October 7th. This is not about drones or missiles. It's about panic. Indeed, panic is exactly what the Kremlin now faces. Russia's elites, long insulated from the chaos of the front, suddenly realized their security bubble had burst. Their lakeside estates in Karelia, once refuges of calm, are now within the strike radius of Ukrainian drones. Could their private jets, marinas, or data centers be next? According to Reuters, Russian security services quietly expanded no-fly zones around St. Petersburg within 24 hours of the attack. Anti-air systems were redeployed from Belgorod and Bryansk, stripping coverage from active combat zones to protect the north. A DW analysis noted that such rapid repositioning signaled strategic panic rather than strategic planning. Moscow's generals face a brutal dilemma: defend the collapsing front lines or defend the homeland's economic core. Either choice opens a new wound. The economic stakes are enormous. St. Petersburg generates nearly 10% of Russia's GDP, housing key shipyards, energy exporters, and the Kirovsky industrial complex. A single successful strike could paralyze critical logistics feeding the Baltic ports. Insurance premiums for northern energy shipments have already surged by 80% since early October, according to Al Jazeera's financial desk. The Kremlin now spends billions reinforcing northern air defenses funds diverted from frontline operations in Zaporizhzhia and Kharkiv. This is the war's economic boomerang. The New York Times quoted a NATO economist. Every ruble spent defending St. Petersburg is a ruble not spent sustaining the front. But the panic is not confined to budgets and bunkers. It's emotional. Wealthy Muscovites who once vacationed in Karelia now see military checkpoints near their villas. Telegram channels that once posted glamour photos now share radar sightings and drone alerts. If we are not safe there, we are not safe anywhere, read one viral post from a St. Petersburg socialite deleted hours later. The illusion that money and proximity to power could buy immunity has collapsed. Meanwhile, Putin's social contract with the elite, prosperity in exchange for loyalty, is unraveling. BBC News reported that members of Russia's business class are quietly moving assets abroad, again echoing the capital flight of 2022. Western sanctions had cornered them before, but now fear drives them. Even the Kremlin's controlled media struggles to suppress the narrative that the northern fortress has fallen. The result is a spreading whisper campaign, a dangerous sign for a regime built on silence. The Trump administration's intelligence community reportedly interprets this panic as a pressure multiplier. According to Defense News, NATO analysts believe the psychological disintegration among Russia's elite could accelerate internal policy rifts, forcing Putin to make rash military decisions. The next phase, said one U.S. official, is not about territory, it's about morale collapse. Washington views this as a turning point where Russia's political front begins to fracture faster than its military one. For ordinary Russians, the attack redefined what war means. Once an abstract word tied to distant reports from Donetsk, it is now a vibration in the ground, a siren in the night. The panic trickles down from oligarchs' estates to factory workers' neighborhoods. A NYT poll from early October showed public confidence in government defense measures had dropped to 42%, the lowest since 2014. And yet, amidst the fear, a new question arises in the corridors of power. If drones can reach Lake Onega, could they reach the Kremlin itself? How could Ukraine, without air superiority and under constant bombardment, strike a high-value target 1,000 kilometers inside Russia? That question has haunted the Kremlin's military command since the Grad vanished beneath Lake Onega's waters. Analysts around the world are dissecting two primary theories: the long-arm drone strike and the ghosts within sabotage scenario. Both, if true, expose a terrifying truth for Moscow. Russia's vast homeland is riddled with vulnerabilities no missile shield can close. According to BBC Verify, satellite data and heat signatures suggest an airstrike consistent with Ukraine's newly modified Lyuty-300 drone, a long-range AI-guided system capable of flying over 1,200 kilometers. This drone, produced domestically with Western-supplied components, can skim the ground-evade radar and carry a 75-kilogram explosive payload. Its composite body renders it nearly invisible to traditional radar. Defense News confirmed that Ukraine's military-industrial complex has since mid-2025 accelerated production of these kamikaze drones under NATO's Logistics Coordination Framework, which indirectly supports targeting data through satellite synchronization. The Lyuty's flight path likely exploited Russia's sparsely populated northern corridors, forests, and lakes, where radar coverage is patchy. It's the perfect blind zone, explained Reuters defense analyst Pavel Polityuk. Russia concentrated its best S-400 systems around Moscow, leaving the interior as a digital wilderness. The New York Times echoed this, citing U.S. defense officials who believe Ukraine's deep strike capability now matches the range once considered exclusive to Russia's cruise missiles. The Lake Onega strike, therefore, is not an anomaly, it is a prototype for future warfare. But the alternative explanation is even more chilling. Several Western intelligence sources, including Al Jazeera's Europe Bureau, have suggested the attack could have been an inside job executed by pro-Ukrainian partisans or special forces already operating inside Russia. According to this theory, small FPV drones or explosive sea drones were deployed from within a few kilometers of the target, guided by real-time reconnaissance. If true, this means Ukraine has successfully penetrated Russia's security apparatus, embedding operatives near critical infrastructure. This was not just an attack, it was infiltration, said DW security correspondent Nina Petrov. And for Moscow, that's worse than defeat. Evidence supports the plausibility of internal sabotage. The Ukrainian GUR intelligence agency has claimed responsibility for multiple railway and power line disruptions inside Russia since late summer. The Onega operation fits the same pattern: high precision, deep penetration, psychological maximum impact. Even Russian social media channels close to the FSB admit the blast likely originated from the inside, though they blame foreign saboteurs. If internal collaborators were indeed involved, It signals something far deeper, a collapse of internal loyalty. Western intelligence circles, as reported by Reuters, describe growing dissent within Russian regional security units. Local officers, fatigued by long deployments and economic strain, are reportedly turning a blind eye to infiltrators. The resulting paranoia is spreading like wildfire through the Kremlin's ranks. The witch hunt has begun, wrote NYT columnist Andrew Kramer, referring to mass interrogations within the FSB's Karelia branch. For Ukraine, this ambiguity is intentional. By never confirming or denying responsibility, Kyiv multiplies Russia's uncertainty. NATO officials privately call it reflexive control, a psychological warfare tactic designed to make the enemy doubt its own systems. A Defense News editorial called it one of the most brilliant uses of plausible deniability in modern asymmetric conflict. Meanwhile, under President Trump's administration, the U.S. has maintained a delicate stance, publicly crediting Ukraine's ingenuity while warning against escalation. A Pentagon briefing on October 10th described the Onega strike as an inflection point, proving that defense dominance can no longer be measured in distance. Behind the scenes, NATO intelligence sharing continues, but Washington avoids direct fingerprints, mindful of Moscow's threats to expand retaliation. Whichever theory is true, drones from the sky or ghosts from within the outcome is the same. Russia's fortress has been breached. And as the Kremlin scrambles to plug invisible holes, a larger question looms. If Ukraine can strike this deep, where will it stop next? When the waters of Lake Onega swallowed the Grad, the explosion did more than sink a ship. It detonated a chain reaction stretching across Russia's military economy and society. Analysts now call it the Onega domino, a sequence of consequences unraveling faster than the Kremlin can contain. Could one strike truly destabilize an empire built on the myth of invincibility? The evidence suggests yes. The first domino is military paralysis. The destruction of the Grad sent shockwaves through the Northern Fleet, forcing Russia to reassess its defensive posture across 11 time zones. According to Defense News, satellite imagery confirms a sudden surge of military redeployments around Murmansk and Severodvinsk. Dozens of vessels, including smaller missile carriers, have been relocated or placed in dry dock for security reviews. NATO's Joint Maritime Command told Reuters that these frantic movements signal defensive desperation, not strategy. With inland waters now vulnerable, the Northern Fleet must either expose itself to NATO surveillance in the Barents Sea or risk remaining trapped inside Russia's inland canal maze. Both options weaken Moscow's deterrent posture. The second domino is economic suffocation. The White Sea Baltic Canal, now considered a potential war zone, has seen its commercial traffic fall by 70% since early October, according to DW Business. Insurance firms have suspended coverage for vessels moving through Karelia's waterways. The canal has turned from a highway to a hazard, said BBC economics editor Faisal Islam. That collapse alone could shave nearly 1% off Russia's GDP this quarter. The cascading impact hits everything from energy exports to timber logistics, amplifying inflation already above 9%. Russia's central bank now faces a liquidity squeeze, forcing emergency reserves to stabilize regional markets. The third domino strikes the political realm. Al Jazeera's Moscow bureau reports a surge in elite anxiety unseen since the early days of the 2022 invasion. The attack's proximity to St. Petersburg shattered the illusion that wealth or distance could shield the powerful. Some oligarchs have reportedly relocated families to Dubai and Istanbul, while lower-level officials quietly move funds abroad. Putin's famed inner circle, once bound by loyalty, now operates in fear and self-preservation. As one European diplomat told the New York Times, the elite have stopped believing the system can protect them. Once that happens, loyalty evaporates. The fourth domino is psychological. Social media within Russia has erupted with disbelief and anger. On Telegram and VK, users post questions that state television refuses to answer. Where is our air defense? How did the enemy fly over half the country? BBC monitoring tracked more than 300,000 posts within 2 days of the incident, showing a sharp decline in trust toward official narratives. This erosion of confidence threatens to evolve into quiet resistance, a slow internal rot more dangerous than any external enemy. Even NATO's analysts briefed under President Trump's administration see in this panic a broader strategic outcome. Ukraine didn't just hit a ship, noted a senior NATO strategist to Defense News. It hit the myth that Russia can keep war away from its heart. The Onega attack effectively opens multiple virtual fronts, psychological, economic, and logistical, that no single military command can defend. The dominoes are falling faster than Russia can stand them back up. The final domino, the global balance. By demonstrating reach deep into Russian territory, Ukraine has altered NATO's defense calculus. European militaries now study the Onega model as a future template for low-cost, high-impact deterrence. The front line of warfare has dissolved, said DW's defense correspondent. This is a new era war without borders, fought through data, distance, and doubt. As the Kremlin scrambles for answers, the grim truth emerges: Russia's size, once its shield, has become its weakness. Every canal, pipeline, and railway is now a potential target. Every reassurance sounds hollow. The flames over Lake Onega illuminate a new reality, one in which geography, once Russia's greatest weapon, is now its Achilles heel. And so, with its navy in retreat, its economy under strain, and its citizens questioning their safety, Moscow faces a haunting question: if Ukraine can strike the heart of the empire once, what stops it from doing so again?